This is a video updating you on some of the 238 men that was sent to CECOT, El Salvadoran torture prison on March 15th by the Donald Trump administration. I've gotten a lot of requests asking for the updates. And one thing you're going to know about this update, I'm going to let you know that all of these men are now part of a class action lawsuit. It's already been certified. The Trump administration actually, interestingly enough, has not filed an opposition to this certification. And the second thing you need to know is that United Nations Human Rights Arm is now involved. They filed a actual inquiry and started an investigation on some of these men. And the third thing you need to know is there has been a whistleblower lawsuit, whistleblower action investigation already launched by Irvy Reveni, who used to be the acting chief, deputy chief of the Department of Justice Immigration Office. He did not, he failed to violate his oath of office, his oath to the court to be honest and truthful. And he was honest and truthful. They fired him for being honest and truthful because apparently the Department of Justice only wants sycophants, people who are willing to sacrifice their law license, and this is my opinion, and anyone's left because they have hemorrhaged a lot of their qualified, seasoned attorneys, and all that's left are people that are willing to argue like baseless things without any base in facts, without base in law. And I know this because if you're new here, my name is JJ Legal. On this account, on social media, one of the things I'm doing is helping people understand the lawsuits filed in the Trump administration. I'm in the dockets. I'm looking at the pleadings. I'm looking at the declarations filed by the Trump administration, by the plaintiffs, by the organizations, by the associations. And a common thread in a lot of these is the Department of Justice attorneys arguing, disputing things. They're not quite sure. The administration say one thing in Fox on social media, and the Department of Justice attorneys say separate things. They don't always mesh, and they've lost all credibility with the courts whatsoever. That's why I'm really disappointed in the Supreme Court. They're looking down, they're seeing this chaos, they're seeing the Trump administration disregard court order after court order, lie, obfuscate, haw, delay, this chaos. Recently, Judge Zenas in the district court, where it's a federal district court, but the Maryland division, I said that it's something like trying to nail Jello to a wall to the extent that they are just arguing stuff that have no basis in facts whatsoever. So that's what we're dealing with here, and you're going to trust me because I'm a former regulatory attorney, a couple of law licenses. I have also argued, I've presented at least a brief to the Supreme Court and argued cases, at least in written format, to 10th Circuit, 5th Circuit Court of Appeals. So I have a little bit of background in this. And so based on my opinion and based on me seeing this, it's just a hot mess right now. But at least you know that whistleblower that I mentioned, Irvy Reveni, has blown open what's going on here and given us a lot of information that we didn't have before because they've been hiding a lot of stuff. So thank you, Mr. Reveni. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Now let's get into it. Stay tuned, share this video with other folks who might be interested.
Okay, so let's finish this up. So some of the men that were taken have gotten news reports about them. Andre Hernandez, who is a gay hairdresser. Franco Tiapo, Vilma Sanguino, Javier Salazar, Jersey Barrios, Maika Escalola. They include people who came here, and here's what's in common amongst all of them. They're all of Venezuelan descent. Donald Trump accused them of being part of the Tren de Agua gang based on their tattoos. But here's the thing, some of the tattoos were autism speak tattoos. There was someone who had a Real Madrid, which is a soccer club tattoo. There's others who just had tattoos that aren't necessarily related to gang. And we know from my reporting, you watched my recent videos, and my name is JJ Legal. One of the things I do here is report the various different Trump lawsuits, lawsuits against the Trump administration. In a recent video, I shared that one of the men that was sent to CECOT, Kilmar Prego Garcia, whose case was national news, released updated his lawsuit against the Trump administration, his account that the guards at the CECOT separated the Salvadorians who have gang tattoos and those that did not, and Kilmar amongst those that did not have gang tattoos. And so I trust the experts of the prison guards and the senior prison guards who they're used to that. So that just tells you to the extent that the Trump administration got a lot of this wrong. So there are a lot of people over there been tortured, criminally tortured, for a civil infraction, because being in the United States without authorization is a civil infraction. But here's the thing, a lot of those people were indeed documented, because there's two ways that you come to the United States, the people here who are undocumented. One is you overstay visa. You have a visa to come to visit on as a visitor for, as a business, and then when your visa expires and you're supposed to go home, these people do not go home, so you overstay. What happens a lot of times, people who overstay may perhaps pivot and say, I'm going to now seek asylum. For example, the wife and kids of the terror suspect in Oregon recently, they were H-1B visas. They came along with their, their family member, and decided to pivot and claim asylum. So if you don't walk across the border and claim asylum, you're still now given a docket number, you're given a court date, and sometimes people give them work permits to come back. So they're in the process. So they're not necessarily undocumented. They have a documentation. So a lot of these people were checking back in. And some of them were actually invited by the United States, because we also, as America, one of the things we do is give people the right to settle here if they're facing some sort of civil unrest, political unrest, humanitarian crisis. So we had Haitians, Cubans, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, Syrians, Ukrainians who experienced unrest, and we will give them what's called temporary protective status, or parole, to come here. And a lot of these men were here because of that. And so they were already registered with the system. And that's exactly how the Trump administration was able to capture them, because they were already in the system. It's not like they were running around undocumented, stuck in the country, living in the shadows. These people already availed themselves. So that is the problem, because a lot of times the MAGAs would say, come legally, don't come illegally, they're illegal, they're illegal. No, these people actually, the court knew who they were. And that's the only way they were caught up in all of this. So you should know that. The next second thing you should know, that how this all come about. Let's talk about the situation that got us here in the first place. So on March 14th, Donald Trump evoked an 18th century law called the Alien Enemies Act, which allows the United States in the War of 1812, World War I or World War II, to round up people who were part of a nation that had an excursion, who either we were at war with, or they had people here to make sure that there weren't folks that are taking over the United States. And so that's the law says, if they're coming here to encroach upon America and take over certain states. He declared the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang as such. Now, there was a couple of attorneys at the National Defense Intelligence Agency that did a memo, and their memo concluded that Donald Trump really didn't have the proper authority to invoke this law. You know what they got? They got fired. So you see a trend here. When you're willing to stand up for Donald Trump, say you're not supposed to be doing that, and declare, like, we're not going to go along with this, you get fired, get pushed out. There's a recent case of that where someone got pushed out. They were greeted with a hero's welcome, because if you're in the Trump administration and you're desperate for a check, you'll continue to argue these things. But some folks stood up and said no, they got fired. I digress. Let's get back to it. So he evoked it nonetheless on March 14th. Right as he was doing that, lawyers at the ACLU were aware that the next day, overnight, they were planning to ship off like 2 or 3 planes to different countries, to Honduras and El Salvador. They rushed to the district court. Luckily, they drew a great draw. They got Judge Jim Boasberg. Chief Justice Roberts had appointed him to the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Court. He was the chief judge of the district court. He went to school, private school, with Kavanaugh. He went to Kavanaugh's wedding. They went to Yale together. He and Neil Gorsuch worked at the same law firm at some point, and he's just well known. A lot of his clerks actually are feeders. They've clerked for Stevens, they clerked for Kavanaugh, they've clerked for Chief Justice Roberts. So this guy is really sharp. You know what? I don't think that was a proper use. So I'm going to go ahead and certify in a nationwide class and say no one who's subject to the law can be deported. And also, if there's any planes in the sky, please bring them back. Now, at this time he was saying this, we know from Irvy Reveni, the whistleblower, that the Trump administration purposefully read him saying that there was an oral order, even though Drew Ensign said he communicated to the Trump administration that he wanted no planes to go while he just look at this case, because a lawsuit had been filed. They ignored him. They were telling him, why are you asking questions? So it was a purposeful obfuscation, and they sent those people off to CECOT. And now we know that we've only been able to get like maybe one back so far, and they're trying to find another one and say they've lost them. That's what we're going to talk about later on, about them losing these men that they sent over to that prison unlawfully and without authorization, and against Jim Boasberg's explicit oral and then later written order telling them they should not do that. They knew they were not supposed to do that, and they were joking about it on social media. Donald Trump was like, oopsie. Marco Rubio retweeted El Salvador president saying, oh, there's a court order saying to bring him back. They've already left. Too late. Oopsie. And here goes Marco Rubio retweeting that. That is so unprofessional and so like rubbing in the face evidence that they definitely did this purposefully, I think, in my opinion. So later on, Judge Jim Boasberg determined that the Trump administration indeed did what is probably criminal contempt. So he's certified and said, I'm going to find out who did this and avoided my orders. But before he can do so, the Trump administration appealed to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court, as we all know, for some weird, odd reason, have given Donald Trump these procedural wins, allowing him to do the lawless things he's doing while the various different parties' lawsuits challenging Donald Trump continue in the court below. And this was one of the first times they did this in this case. They told Jim Boasberg that he cannot certify a nationwide class. We know that's an issue for the Supreme Court. But they did say that they could certify a class, but not necessarily nationwide. It could be narrow. It's between the people in front of you and similarly situated folks in a narrow context. So the ACLU asked Jim Boasberg, can you certify a class of these men, the 238 men that were sent over to CECOT? And he said yes. The Trump administration have not opposed it. So as far as today, those men are part of a class action lawsuit. So any win that comes out of this class action lawsuit, they'll all be the beneficiary of it. So that's great news. Yay. And in the meantime, Jim Boasberg continues to get information, evidence. One of the pieces of information he got was ACLU filed on June 26th, the June 25th whistleblower letter and lawsuit filed by Irvy Reveni, just revealing everything I told you before, that essentially drew the ensign, according to Irvy Reveni, asked him why did he not say that Kemal Abrego Garcia was a member of the MS-13, and Reveni said, well, I have no evidence of that. I can't be arguing stuff that there's no substantiated basis for it. But we know Drew Ensign is willing to do that. And he said it was an error. And because he said it was an error, Pam Bondi and those guys fired him for being honest. That's the whistleblower lawsuit, thus him blowing the cap off of everyone, including the horrible guy who's trying to be a district court judge. And he said, according to Reveni, that these judges don't abide by their court orders. So they're getting information from the top saying that. So we're hoping that Emile Bove, who, according to Reveni's whistleblower lawsuit, essentially said, these judges and don't care about them and don't, he shouldn't be nominated. Anyway, so, that's what the contempt continues. Reveni's, later on in a future video, I'm going to go through some of the things that were in that lawsuit because it's really important. So it validates what I've said to you if you follow my account, that a lot of times the Trump administration argue things, have their Department of Justice make arguments without basis in facts or basis in any law or precedent. And they, in the meanwhile, and they say they're going to abide, but the Trump administration officials in Fox News talking to the base will just say things that are just the total opposite. And it comes to bite them back in the butt. I have done videos explaining to which the Trump administration actually get reversed. But they're so bombastic. They just come with so much news and shock and awe that very few people follow up to see to the extent to which they are paused, they do get rolled back. And ultimately, I think on a substance basis, they lose. And they should lose at the Supreme Court as well. Because there's no way the Supreme Court can interpret a lot of the things the Trump administration done as being valid, especially when they clearly violate the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, not Second Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, all the different laws, congressional acts, a lot of corruptions. They're just lawless for the most part. Donald Trump and all of his cabinet members have betrayed their oath of office multiple times over. They're just operating on a bizarre, they're just allegiance to this one man. Nothing he's doing is for the people. It's just cruel punishment, grifting, and these enablers that the Republicans and the Senate essentially confirmed, because none of these people would be empowered to do a lot of these things but for the Republicans actually confirming them. So every single thing that these sycophants are doing, the cabinet, I think the Republicans and the Senate, they own that. And so when the midterms come, we have to let them know that we don't appreciate them giving up the government, giving up their power and yielding it to Donald Trump. Is just so bizarre to me because they don't know what they're doing. They're actually destroying the country. They're using their racism and xenophobia to make ridiculous cuts, to pause different programs and essentially drive tourism away, drive the funds that just do a lot of things that just destroy and make life more miserable, cause a lot of hurt. And every single thing that's caused from their cuts, from Elon's cuts, from the weather reports to planes falling out the sky, they own all of that. and they own all of it, and we need to make sure and they get this equal blame. As much as they're coming at us from shock and all with all the executive orders, this craziness, we need to hit them back with all these various different things. Anyway, I talk fast. You have two other options. If you want to hear this faster, speed it up, depending on what you're watching this, or you can slow it down if I'm talking too fast. But anyway, I digress. Now, in addition to the Reveni lawsuit, the United Nations Human Rights Arm has launched an investigation on behalf of the family of 4 of the men sent to CECOT, including Andre Hernandez, who's a gay voluntary disappearance. Now, the Trump administration has not said anything about this involuntary disappearance as of this video being filmed, but I can tell you that they responded to the ACLU placing on the records Irvy Reveni's whistleblower lawsuit, saying that the briefing schedule is done and it's extrajudicial, like it's outside the scope of the lawsuit. But however, it's very relevant to the portion of the lawsuit where the judge is trying to determine whether or not the Trump administration was actually obfuscating and purposefully disobeying his court order. And the whistleblower's lawsuit didn't come into light until after the briefing schedule was over. So there's ways that they can actually get it on the record. And they didn't oppose anything he said. They just said it's too late for them to enter it. So I think that's very quite interesting. And it was very damning, especially for Drew Ensign in particular, who was part of this, and he's been the one arguing a lot of the Trump administration crazy things. Like he's just like really just gave up all his integrity, in my opinion, on this. I'm gonna keep saying in my opinion. You should know it's my opinion at this. But anyway, so that's the update. Now, I don't know what it means that they say they haven't heard from him. They've contacted the CECOT, and CECOT says they don't have any records of them. The minute the Trump administration sent those people off, they kind of lost record. They say they fell out. That's by design. Whether it's purposeful, I don't know. But I do know that all eyes are on them. And if anything happened to those men, if anything in terms of them being unalived, of them being like critically injured, the Trump administration and Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, all of them should be on the hook. Now, while Donald Trump might have had criminal immunity, as of to his acts, the rest of them do not have criminal immunity as far as we know. And they can't latch onto Donald Trump's criminal immunity. And to the extent any states can file things against them for their actions that they're doing in their states, those states, any prosecution of those states cannot be pardoned for Donald Trump. So he can try to proactively leave the White House pardoning these people, but at the end of the day, their actions, to the extent that it violates international laws, state laws, can come back to bite them in the ass, and I hope it does. I had some debates with some people who said that they don't think there's going to be anything come out of it, but we do know that Mark Meadows right now currently is being prosecuted in the state of Georgia for his role in the Find the Votes case. We know that a lot of attorneys who are part of them lost their law license, who are part of that scheme. We know that Steve Bannon had gone to jail for Donald Trump. Roger Stone, had Donald Trump not gotten back in office and pardoned him, would have served some jail time as well. We know that there are other people who were, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, has gone to jail. So it's not out of the realms to think that these people won't be held accountable, not just in their professional capacity, but in their personal capacity, because we know that Rudy Giuliani, because he defamed those election workers, he lost his house. So there's a lot of accountability to come in. There's an other side to this. I know it's hard to believe, but Donald Trump's 79. No matter what you say, there's going to be elections, and the way he's destroying the country, I'm sure he's ignited some of the 90 million people who sat out. There's a lot of folks ain't going to make that mistake. There's a lot of FAFO. There's a lot of leaving MAGA folks out there that hopefully everyone's activated, and people know that the earliest that they get a chance to at least shift a lot of this is during the midterms, when when they flip it, the Democrats become the chair. They have subpoena power. They have a lot more power to stop his agenda. And if we can get 2/3, oh my God, that's my campaign. Anyway, JJ Legal, each one teach one. I hope this video is helpful for you. Let's discuss below. Check out my Know Your Rights card, and I'll see you in the next video. And if you're watching this on any of these places, check out the playlist here or below.